Alright, welcome in. I'm the Kodiak. It is currently 2 a.m. on a Friday morning, which means you know what time it is. It is time to talk about Troy Franklin and why his rookie year was a disappointment, but why I am not giving up on him yet, and I definitely do not want the rest of Broncos country to give up on him yet. First of all, I just want to mention a couple things. Leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. You can always wait until the end. Hopefully I'll have earned it. My comment question of the day is, do you like the incomplete chant? Like when the Broncos fans yell, incomplete. Do you like that? And yeah, follow me on Twitter if you like what I have said here at Kodiak Broncos. Let's dive right into it. So, I think it's fair to say that we all wanted more from Troy Franklin. And listen, I do not want to rush to any conclusion about Troy Franklin for better or for worse. But I think it is very valid to be disappointed by the limited sample we saw his rookie year. We traded up for him. He was Bo Nix's #1 college target. And he wasn't just your typical 4th round dude who you would take as a wide receiver on day 3. Like all that coincided with the fact that we kind of expected Troy Franklin to have a bigger role than a 4th round pick would usually have in his rookie year, especially because the Broncos in 2024 were barren with draft capital. They were barren with draft capital in 22, 23, and 24, so they had to make a home run with literally every single pick they selected, and I guess they selected Troy Franklin as their 3rd pick of the whole draft. And, it's okay to be disappointed. I get it. But a lot of it felt like preconceived draft notion to me about him being a late 1st, early 2nd round talent. Say what you want about the dynasty community, and I know that the dynasty community does get a lot of hate around actual NFL draft circles, but my thing with the dynasty community is that they rely so heavily on analytics, and if you like analytics, Troy Franklin was the kind of prospect you liked. But film guys had their questions. Film guys had their questions about, if he had the frame to hold up in the NFL. Film guys had their questions, about his play strength and whether or not that would translate to when he actually had to go up against NFL defensive backs rather than Pac-12 defensive backs who were playing with wide hashes. And yeah, but the NFL seems right with their valuations of Troy Franklin as a 4th round guy. Sometimes, with guys that the community are really in on, sometimes the NFL gets it wrong. But I'm more erring on the fact that the NFL probably got it right with the way they value Troy Franklin, which, by the way, by draft capital, they clearly view as a 4th round dude. And by the fact that he didn't really produce much in his first year, he was a 4th round talent rather than a late 1st, early 2nd that a lot of people had said. So, listen, I'm disappointed. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I also, throughout the year, was really disappointed and wondering why Troy Franklin had not earned a bigger role in the offense, why he had not earned more targets, why he had not earned the trust of his coaching staff. Like, listen, we had no wide receiver talent on this team pretty much, and they still played very lackluster for pretty much all of 2024. I'm not talking about Troy Franklin specifically. I'm talking about the whole room. And listen, we traded up to get him. Like I said, I don't remember exactly what the cost was, but we traded up with Seattle to the 2nd pick of the 4th round, and trading up increases the faith in a player. It increases the stock that you are putting into a player, becoming a focal point of your team and your offense. But like I said, not your typical round 4, day 3 guy. Now, it is not invalid to question whether or not he has a spot in this offense long term. Not invalid at all. But listen, stay patient. If we can make Marvin Mims work, who had some of the worst success rates as a route runner against man, against zone, against press in his rookie year, the talent was clearly there on special teams. But for a 2nd round pick, he was on track to having a very, very god-awful role in the offense. But guess what? We stayed the course, we stayed patient, and this coaching staff found a role for him. And we can do that with Troy Franklin too, because Troy Franklin is more of a real wide receiver than Mims is. But yeah, like I said, we can just make anyone work. And listen, talking about that touchdown in Buffalo, that was absolutely magical. Like those 5 minutes or so of hope that he gave us, that was absolutely insane. And I am so happy that Troy Franklin got that touchdown. And I know that nobody is more happy than he is that he got the touchdown. So we struggled all year to see Bo Nix and Troy Franklin connect. Looked like the chemistry was just off all year, which didn't make a lot of sense considering they didn't have the excuse of being new and unfamiliar with one another. They had literally played in college for 2 years prior, which is a long time in college football for a quarterback and wide receiver to get that connection going. But some of the other misses that they had are the one against Tampa Bay. That wasn't really that bad. It was just a hair off. from both of them. It honestly could have been completed, but both of them were just this much off, and it was their third game as pros, so I was like, okay, whatever. But the Raiders drop, that was bad. And I think part of the reason why that happened was because I don't think Troy Franklin was expecting to be that wide open, and I think Sean Payton and Bo Nix actually ended up yelling at each other on the sidelines because that was a play that was not supposed to happen. It was just a busted play on the Raiders' part and an even more busted play on the Broncos' part. But miraculously, Troy Franklin found his way open. Yeah, that drop was painful. Now, the overtime misfire against the Bengals, I'm not going to fault either of them for that. Like, I think it's more on Bo than it is on Troy Franklin because if Bo Nix throws a better ball there, Troy Franklin is probably still running to this day. It can't be something called by Sean Payton that hasn't worked all year. Like, the process of calling that is just god-awful. But I can't imagine how good it must have felt for Bo Nix and Troy Franklin to finally connect on one, let alone in the wild card game against the Buffalo Bills on the first drive of the game in the playoffs of all the moments. And I don't care that he played terribly. I don't care that he had 2 third down drops. I don't care that he had a penalty. I don't care that he had a play where he literally gave up and it cost Jaleel McLaughlin a first down on 4th down when the Broncos had to have it. I don't care about any of that because for the next 8 months, we get to talk about that touchdown. Nobody in May is going to remember those third down drops he had. Nobody in May is going to remember, all that from the rest of the Buffalo game. So the fact that we get to end the year on a positive note when we talk about Troy Franklin, this is amazing. And if you talk about Troy Franklin this year, I think pretty much you can't go without mentioning that touchdown because it's kind of like, how can I put this? It's like a season summary of Troy Franklin. Like, you could easily say, yeah, he didn't really do much his rookie year. He's kind of a developmental project. Like, if you had said that about Troy Franklin, I would be like, and then what? And then I'd be like, okay. And then in the first drive of the playoff game, he ended up scoring a 50-yard touchdown, which is something they could not convert on all year. But the fact that they showed it really, really makes me optimistic for the future. So the discourse on Troy Franklin is wild. I've seen a lot of Broncos fans advocate for him to be cut this offseason. And like I said, while it's not invalid to question about whether or not he has his role on this offense solidified for the long-term future, I just don't see how, cutting Troy Franklin makes this room better, especially because if you were to cut a guy who you traded up to get early round 4, you just look like an absolute fool. And I've seen Broncos fans advocate for a position battle between Franklin and Bailey, and only one of them can play in the slot. And hey, I don't disagree because Franklin was mainly used as an X this year. Like, I'm pretty sure his snap share between X and slot was 66% and 34%. 66% of those were on the boundary. So I don't really get that. I think Franklin is more of an outside wide receiver than an inside wide receiver. But if you were to move him to the inside, then it solidifies that you have found your solid X, going forward. And maybe they do in the draft. I don't know. But I don't agree with the process of replacing Franklin with Tez Johnson either. We already have 2 undersized guys in our wide receiver room in Mims and Franklin, and it's just adding too many cooks in the kitchen. If you were to add a guy like Tez Johnson, who's like 5'8", I think 150 pounds, it's not uncommon to see those small receivers succeed. Like, even Tank Dell was a little successful before he completely fractured his fibula, and he hasn't been the same since. So there are frame questions and durability questions. But Tutu Atwell is another guy who I think was really, really light. And listen, this is a team that does not wait on mistakes. Like, Sean Payton, he will cut anybody that he feels like is a mistake for the team to brought in. And he does not take long at all to move on. So we'll know by next year on whether or not he was a mistake or not. But we've seen unprecedented random development. Why can't it be Troy Franklin? Why do you guys think that Troy Franklin can't be the next one to look completely dead in the water and then have a career revival or resurgence? I don't know, man. So as a prospect, analytically, analytics nerds, as I mentioned, really, really like Troy Franklin. And, looking at this guy on Reddit's model, it seems like Franklin had hit a lot of certain production thresholds. And honestly, when I was evaluating wide receivers when I was, growing up, probably 3 or 4 years ago, the main things I cared about were how they were analytically because, production, a wide receiver producing is quite literally, a numbers game. And it's more range of outcomes based more than anything else. But this guy has Franklin as the fourth best prospect behind Marvin Harrison Jr., Ladd McConkey, and Malik Neighbors in the draft class. So Troy Franklin as an analytic prospect was about as clean as anybody else in the draft. Like, yes, he was still fourth, and he wasn't as like dominant as a freshman as guys like MHJ and Neighbors. So obviously it's going to be a little skewed there. But listen, I think looking at some of the other models with how people perceive Troy Franklin, a lot of the hype surrounding him in the dynasty community was, pegging him as a round one, day two guy or round two guy. And looking at the career yards per out run between Harrison, Neighbors, Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, BTJ, Keon, Adonai, listen, not all these guys are going to hit. Looks like five. Actually, it looks like the only hits that are not on this chart so far are Troy Franklin, Keon, and A.D. Mitchell. So three of the seven guys that are listed there are already not on a good track in the NFL. But guess what? It's the NFL. Like, sometimes your picks aren't going to work out. But if you want to say you want to build the perfect receiver by asking them to meet volume and efficiency thresholds when it comes to, commanding volume within an offense, because I know that's one of the reasons why analytical thresholds can be so useful, you would get T. Higgins 2019, MHJ, Devontae Smith, Troy Franklin, Elijah Moore, Tyler Johnson, Drake London, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, like a bunch of other dudes. So the Troy Franklin hype did not come from nowhere. That's what I'm trying to say here, is that Troy Franklin was a community favorite, but the film guys had their questions about him. So Troy Franklin was a 9 RAS dude. I think a lot of this is due to the fact that his size is not that good. And if his size was really a lot better, then I think we would have seen a lot more people get really hyped on Troy Franklin. Like, for example, if he was 6'3", I think a lot more people would be excited. But yeah. So this is basically Troy Franklin's college production, like the advanced analytics when it comes to college production. 31% dominator, 3.19 adjusted yards per play. And ultimately, this is just showcasing that he had cleared most production thresholds. Now, film guys had a very different opinion on Franklin. This is from the Matt Harmon reception perception breakdown of Troy Franklin when he was coming out last year. And I don't want to showcase his reception perception chart because this is paid data and I want to respect Matt Harmon. But listen, one of the things he said in his evaluation was he didn't look quite comfortable working over the middle. He fell below average running digs and slants, especially because slants are a big part of the Sean Payton offense. And he's a difficult evaluation because he has some nuance to his route running, but lack of play strength and frame really, really haunt him. And he says, I don't know how you can watch Franklin play and not come away concerned that he doesn't trust his hands. That is something that I think a lot of Broncos fans were also really annoyed looking at this year and seeing Troy Franklin. Now, film guys, once again, had a very different opinion on Troy Franklin. This is from another dude who is in the NFL scouting community. He said that Franklin has a thin frame and lacks functional strength. He has struggled with physical press man coverage. Footwork in the contact window is fine. Doesn't engage his hands. Not an ideal weapon. Franklin does not come down with many high point passes. Has not been strong in contested catch situations. Prefers to wait on the football to drop into his arms. So listen, for better or for worse, this is exactly what we saw in Troy Franklin. Like, all the film guys that did not like his game, this is exactly what they were talking about. And they nailed the evaluation of what kind of player he was, because I felt like we saw that a lot this year. We saw a guy who didn't win consistently vertical, and it basically comes down to whether he can bulk up without sacrificing speed, and his deep ball tracking will just need to get a lot better. There is a non-zero chance he can't play in the NFL, and I just want to acknowledge that right now. But he will need the support of Broncos country to get there. Like, it does not do anybody any good to have preconceived notions about Troy and, talk about how the community was viewing him last year at this time. Like, yes, was he mocked to the Patriots early round 2 in pretty much every mock draft in 2024? Yeah, sure. But that shouldn't change the fact that he is now one of us. He fell further than we expected him to. And ultimately, I just want everybody to get that idea of Troy Franklin being an early round dude out of their minds. Listen, it is completely okay to be disappointed with Troy Franklin because, like I said, Bo Nix is number 1 in college. We traded up to get him. Not your typical day 3 guy, but we have to have hope. We have to have hope that he can figure it out. And you know what? based on the way this coaching staff has made miracles out of a lot of other dudes who I thought were dead in the water, I see no reason why they can't do that again. So yeah, that is my little rant about Troy Franklin. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Mile high salute.